Okay, this is going to be the support section for section 2.2 in college algebra. So this section is going to be going over like terms and what that means and how to combine them, what is a like term, what's not a like term, and things like that. So the first thing we need to look at is what makes terms be like terms. Okay, so I've made a couple of examples here. In order to be a like term, you have to have the same variable, and that variable also has to have the same exponent. Okay, so these are like terms. This x, this is an x, and this is an x. They're all the same kind of term. They've got different coefficients, which is the number in front of them, but they're all the same kind of term. Okay, so those are like terms. Also here, that's an AB, that's an AB, and that's an AB. So even though they have multiple letters, they all have the same multiple letters. They're all ABs. It's kind of like putting all the same eggs in the same basket. Okay, so if you have your variables are exactly the same, then you are like terms, which means those terms can be combined into one term. You can put them all together, which we're going to do in a minute. These are not like terms. Okay, this is an X and this is a Y. That makes them not like terms. You would not be able to combine those terms in any way. Same with this one. This wasn't an X, but this one's an X squared. So they both have X's, but one's just an X and one's an X squared, which means those are also not like terms, which means you can't combine those terms either. Okay? Hang on, let me get an eraser. Okay, so now what we're going to do is look at some terms and we're going to simplify it by forming an equivalent expression by combining like terms. So this should go along with the handout that was sent to you. My first one is n minus 11n. Okay, so first of all, we notice that these are like terms. So I can put these together, and the way that you put them together is you just look at their coefficients, and if you don't see a number in front of your variable, it's automatically a 1. So this has, you have 1 in here, and you're subtracting 11 in. So if you wanted, you can just do the coefficients in your calculator. So I just need to know what 1 minus 11 is, right? So just type that in. 1 minus 11 gives you negative 10. So all together, you've got negative 10 n's. Okay, so when we get into solving equations and doing things where there's multiple terms that have the same variable, we're going to simplify things in that problem by, instead of writing all of this, you can simplify it to just one term. Since those terms are the same kind, there's no reason to write them separate when you can put them together. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Okay, let's look at number 2. So here we've got 11t plus 9t minus 4t. So again, you'll notice that they're all t's. Again, that means they are all like terms, which means I can put them all together. There's no reason to write these separately. So I just need to know what 11 plus 9 minus 4 is. And again, you can just type that all in your calculator all at the same time. So just 11 plus 9 minus 4 to see how many t's you have, which altogether you would have 16. What do you have 16 of? You've got 16 t's. Okay? Now, sometimes a group of terms will have a parenthesis around it with a number bumping up that against that parenthesis. And this is when we're going to use what's called the distributive property. Like on number 3, you've got a negative in front of your parentheses, and your parentheses, inside your parentheses, you have d minus 14. So here, What this means is if you have a number, which this is a -1, and it is touching your parentheses, there's nothing in between it. That's telling you in order to remove those parentheses, you need to distribute that number or that sign, okay? Now, when you have a negative in front of your parentheses and you distribute it, this right here is going to change these signs, right? This negative distributed to that D gives me just a negative D now. But what does this mean? If you distribute a negative to another negative, in other words, what you're doing here is multiplying. So what is a negative times a negative going to turn that sign into? It's going to turn that into plus 14. Now, after you do the distribution, you're looking at your separate terms that you have now and seeing if there's any that you can combine to simplify. But this is a D, and this is just a constant, which is a number without a variable, which means these two terms cannot combine, so you are done with that problem. All right, number 4. All right, same as number 3. It's the same kind of problem. There's just more terms in your parentheses. I'm going to distribute this negative, which we found on the last problem. When you distribute a negative to a group of terms, the terms are all going to change signs. So what is this one going to turn into? It'll make that a negative 70C. It turns, so if I distribute a negative to this negative, it turns that into a positive 40D. And if I distribute a negative to this positive 44, it's going to turn it into a negative 44. And once again, I'm looking at my terms to see if there's any way I can simplify this. However, one's a C, one's a D, and one's a constant, which means nobody can combine. So that's just all you can do on that one. All right, number 5. You've got 9A minus, then an open parentheses, 5A plus 2, close. Now, if you've got a set of parentheses, you want to remove those before you combine anything, okay? Which means in order to remove parentheses, you distribute what's touching it. This 9A is not touching the parentheses. This negative is, just like the last ones. This 9A is just going to come down. The way I'm going to remove the parentheses is distribute that negative. So I'll bring down the 9A. I'll distribute this negative, which is going to make that a negative 5A. And it also turns this positive into a negative 2. Now, this time after I have distributed, I notice, look at these terms. Aren't they both A's? So once again, there's not a reason in the world to write those A's separately when you can put them together. Okay, so let's see, you've got 9 of them minus 5, so 9 minus 5, so I really just have 4A. This couldn't combine, right? Because it was a constant and not like these. So I'm just bringing down the minus 2. Right, number 6. $7D minus 8 minus open parentheses 3 minus 7D. All right, so once again, before I start combining, you don't want to combine anything until after you've distributed, because after you distribute, these signs are going to change, right? Again, because it has that negative. So you don't want to combine anything until your parentheses are gone. What's not being changed is what's out. So I'm just going to bring down this 7D minus 8. Now let's see, minus 3. And this negative turns that negative into a positive 7D. Now, we have a situation here where I can see there's some cleaning up I can do because I don't need all those terms. Since I can combine some of them. Let's see, I can combine, there's a D and there's a D. There's no reason to write those separately. If I've got 7 of them here and 7 more of those here, now I have 14 Ds. You do not get a D squared when you are combining like terms. You can only get D squared if you're doing D times D. That's what gives you D squared. When you're combining like terms, you're going to just add the coefficients together. And it's going to be the same kind of term. You're just putting them all in the same basket. I've got 7 here and 7 here. So I've got 14 D's all together. I also noticed, what about these? I can also put those together, right? I've got negative 8 here. And then subtract 3 more. So if you're uncomfortable with that, right, what can you do? You can do negative 8 minus 3 in your calculator. So remember, there's your negative 8, then here's your minus 3. So it should look like that. Negative 8 minus 3 gives you negative 11. So after this 14D, you're going to have minus 11. Again, much cleaner than all 4 of those terms. We helped ourselves out by combining those like terms. Right, number 7. Okay, so again, remove parentheses, then clean it up. So what is bumped this time? What is touching these parentheses? This sign, this whole thing right here is, right? That negative 7 is what I'm distributing here. So let's see. This 15x is not affected, so it'll just come down. Let's see, negative 7 times 3x gives me negative 21x. Negative 7 times negative 4. We've got a negative times a negative. If you don't like this, punch it in, please. Negative 7 times negative 4 gives me positive 28. Now I'm done with the parentheses. So this is not affected. So this minus 5 just comes down. Now let's clean this up. Let's put our x's together, which would be these first 2 terms. I've got 15 minus 21. If you want, punch that in. 15 minus 21 is going to give you negative 6. X's. Now I can also put my constants together, right? There's no reason to write 28 minus 5 when the same exact thing is positive 23. All right, last one. This one has some fractions in it, but remember, we can use our calculator to do fraction work. Let's see, I've got 1/4 times 32x minus 4, close, minus 1/3 times negative 9x plus 6 minus 12. Oops. So a couple of things. I've got 2 parentheses that need to be removed before I can do anything else. So let's see, 1/4 is what I'm going to distribute here. Negative 1/3 is what I'm going to distribute there. So let's see, the first thing I'm going to have is 1/4 times 32x. You can do that number part in your calculator, right? Let's look at this. What do I need to do? I need to know what 1/4 times 32 is. So just type it in. 1, make the fraction bar with the divided symbol, 4th. Then to multiply, you can just put in open parentheses 32, close, enter. So that just gives me 8. So when I distribute this 1/4 times 32x, it gives me 8x. Now what do I need to do? I need to do 1/4 times -4. So do the same thing, just multiply 1/4 times -4. So 1/4, open parentheses, -4, whoops, close. So 1/4 times -4 gives me -1. So when I distribute 1/4 to -4, it gave me -1. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. The first thing I have is -1/3 times -9. So again, in your calculator, -1/3. So just type it in, -1/3 times -9. So remember, your negative is below the 3, -9, close, enter. Right now, look what it did. Since it's a negative times a negative, it turned into +3. So when I distribute this, -1/3 times -9x, it gave me +3x. And the last one, -1/3 times +6. So just do it again, -1/3. So -1/3 times 6 gives me -2. So again, -1/3 times +6 gives me -2. Now, since that's where the parentheses ends, this -12 is not affected, so it just comes down. And now we just need to clean it up. Let's see, x's. Who are my x's? I've got 8 here and 3 here. So actually, altogether, I've got 11x. Then I have all of these constants that I can put together. If you're not comfortable, just type it in. So I've got -1. Then let's see, what do I have? -2 minus 12. So -2 minus 12. So all together, if I put those all together, I have -15. So -15. Okay, so that is the support for 2.2.